I don't know how it will feel when I get to publication day and there's other people reading my books, and it's really strange that it kind of starts just, an idea from you in your head, it doesn't exist, and then it's this other thing, which, I'm kind of just at the beginning of that journey, but I'm kind of in awe of already.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Conversation with your host, Nadine Matheson. As always, I hope that you're well and I hope that you've been enjoying this fantastic bumper week of The Conversation, because on Monday I had a coffee break with New York Times bestselling author S.A. Cosby, where we spoke about his new book, King of Ashes. On Tuesday, I was in conversation with author Lola Akinmade, whose novel Bitter Honey is out now. And today I'm in conversation with debut author Mel Pennant, and her novel, A Murder for Miss Hortense, which is a cosy crime mystery featuring this fantastic nurse called Miss Hortense, is out today. And if you haven't got your copy, please go and get your copy and support Mel Pennant. And in our conversation, Mel and I talk about embracing the writer identity, creating her character, Miss Hortense, and the importance of patience and self-love in this writer's life. Now, as always, sit back, we'll go for a walk and enjoy the conversation. Mel Pennant, welcome to The Conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right, my first question for you is, and I'm going to hold it up because I feel like I have to, because it's my proof copy, and I'm sorry it's got a tea stain on it, but how excited are you about your debut novel, A Murder for Miss Hortense? And I feel like I need to say it in a Grenadian accent, Miss Hortense.
I'm so excited. I think firstly I should say I'm super excited to be on this podcast because it's like one of my milestones. So I've been listening to you for a very, very long time, and even preparing, very early, what's it going to be like when Nadine interviews me? Not that I thought, it would happen, but it was just like, if I, this is like one of my amazing moments. So firstly, thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're so welcome. And that's so cool.
Brilliant. And I love the podcast and I loved everything you're doing. And I think it's really important. It creates a lot of transparency in the space, which I think is really important and has been really, really helpful for me. So thank you. And then, I'm just super excited. So I've got Miss Hortense next to me too. It's a bit like a dream. It's very surreal. It's like, I'm having to pinch myself all the time, but it's wonderful. It's lovely. Yeah.
How long have you wanted it?
Do you know, it's a really interesting question because I think I've always been like a storyteller from a child. I've always sort of created stories in my mind and done lots of daydreaming. I was that child that was quite reserved and, people probably thought like, why isn't she talking? But actually I had all this stuff going on in my head. I was very happy. I had my characters' whole lives, and I feel like I've been a storyteller and created stories since I can ever remember. But I never thought I'm going to write a novel. I never thought that's my future. I'm going to be a novelist. I'm going to be a writer. I trained as a lawyer, and it was while I was training that I was just thinking I need something more creative in my life. I think, when you're sort of at the beginning of a career, I think you kind of think, oh my gosh, there's only a right way and a wrong way. So, it's very like straight and like, I've got to get this right. And I felt like I needed something else in my life. And I did lots of exploring. So I was opposite Central St. Martin's when I was training. So I did loads of evening classes in like tailoring and like painting and pottery or whatever they did. And I did a writing class. I was just hooked. I was like, oh my gosh, just something connected again, I think, from being that child and, telling those stories in my head. And I just loved it. Just something connected with me. And I think maybe because I was in this other space where for me at that time, it was like, there's a right and a wrong and you can't step out of that and there's a particular style. And then there's this other world where I could just say and do and be whatever. And it was coming from my gut. And I just loved it. And so I think ever since then, I got the bug and I was like, I need this in my life. So from doing that, I did lots of short courses, when I had my first child, I was like, right, this is my chance to kind of really kind of immerse myself in this world. So I signed myself up for a master's in creative writing because, when you're pregnant, you're like, I'll have the baby, but I have 9 months to do like anything I want to do a master's. and actually I did it I signed up for it in Bath. So I thought, I'm going to, at the weekends, I'm just going to go to Bath for like the courses, and then I'm going to come back and, it'll all be fine with a little baby. I don't know what I was thinking. And I didn't do it. Basically, I did it twice and I was like, oh my gosh, what
This is a lot.
So then I did a more local creative writing class in screenwriting at the London College of Communication. And I did that part-time. And I think I just knew if I can keep all these courses in my life, if I can just keep, allowing it to be a part of what I'm doing, I just saw that it was really good for my well-being. And I naturally gravitated towards playwriting. I think that's because the first course that I did was in playwriting, the one in Bath. But I also found that it was a world that I really enjoyed. And so started doing playwriting, entering competitions, finding kind of peers and people that I could kind of engage with in the space. And then started writing in that space. But again, never thought I'd write a novel. I mean, maybe like everyone says, oh yeah, I'll write a novel one day, but never really thought that would be me. And then just some things happened, which sort of got me in the space, and kind of, here I am.
It's so interesting. Like if you speak to any of the baby lawyers who have done a course with me, who I've just taught over the last, I've been doing it for, I think, 11 years. And you speak to any of them, they will always tell you that. I always say to them, make sure that you find something else outside of this, outside of being a lawyer, because like you said, it's very black and white, the law. It's black and white, it's good and bad, right and wrong. And I was thinking, how there's always like a house style in terms of the law firms and how you present your letters and things like that. It's like the house style like extends to you as a person. And I said it becomes all consuming. So I always say to them, find something outside of this, find something creative. If you go mountain climbing, do something else, because this can't just be it. I know it's your job and it's what you want to do, but this just can't be it. There needs to be something else. And it's so, I think it's really good that you found that and like recognized that so early on, like before you burned out, because so many lawyers I know like burn out completely.
Yeah, it's true. And I have conversations with junior lawyers in the space now, and they're like, oh, I did writing, in uni, or I did it here, but I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to wait, or I'm putting that to one side, or my family have sort of said, don't do. And I'm like, you should not do that. You should try and incorporate whatever you love into your life. Don't like wait for some perfect time to kind of engage in the spaces that you love, because that time won't come and no one's going to give you the time. So you have to kind of, and I think it really helps you then to be better in all parts of your life, whether that's in your professional day job, in your family life, whatever it is. If you're pursuing something that really gives you joy, it kind of just permeates everywhere. And it's hard, that balance of doing everything is really, really hard. And I don't know that I've perfected it, but I do know that I have no regrets about making writing a part of my life, because it's integral to me. And I know that when I'm not doing it, I'm not a very nice person to be around. I have to do it. I have to kind of, I have to just, and maybe, as I say, I've done it since I was a child, imagining characters, hearing their voices. So it's a part of me. And I'm really pleased that I found, early, this was in my 20s when I sort of got back into writing. I'm really pleased that I found it then, because I think it's really helped me, as I say, in all walks of my life.
Yeah. It's, I think a couple of weeks ago, I think it was about maybe 2-3 weeks ago, I wrote this article on my Substack, and it was basically because I cannot for the life of me remember where I heard it, whether it was on a podcast or I was watching something on TV, and someone, it could have been a film, and someone said, "Do you have a joyful hobby?" And I was sitting there thinking, "Do I have a joyful hobby?" Like I didn't think I couldn't think of anything. And my best friend came round, saying literally like half an hour after that question was like percolating in my head. And I asked her, I said, "Do you have a joyful hobby?" And then she said to me, "Well, you have a joyful hobby. You're writing." And I said, "No, my writing's become my work. That's become my job now." And then we're talking about all the things that I was used to do in the past and that she was doing in the past. Like she used to like making jewelry. So that was her joyful hobby. And then I remembered that I used to paint. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I used to paint." I was like, I'm going to go back and do that. So do you consider writing to be your job now, or is it still your joyful hobby? And if it isn't your joyful hobby, do you have something else that's replaced it? That's like 3 questions in once. I'm not supposed to do that.
There's all really good questions. So I think in answering this question, I sort of think about the reflections that I've had recently. I think as my writing has become more public, in the sense that I'm becoming now a published author, I've had to kind of, I think I always used to see writing as my side hustle and as my kind of secret thing. And so I wouldn't call myself a writer. And if people asked me about my writing, I'd like engage with them and have conversations with them, but it wasn't how I started the conversation. I didn't walk into a room and someone said, "Oh, what do you do?" I'd say, "Oh, I'm a writer." Yeah. But as I've moved more into this kind of world and this more published author world, I kind of have to acknowledge that. And I have to acknowledge it in other spaces as well. So in my day job, you know, now people will probably Google me and see that I come up as a writer. So yeah, that's what I am. But for a long time, I saw it as a bit of a side hustle and my thing. And actually, that was really good because it was like my hideaway place. So if something wasn't going right in one space, then I've got this other space that no one knows about that's giving, you know, and then if that's not going so well, I'll come back to this. And so, you know, I enjoyed managing that space in that way. But now I do embrace the fact that I'm a writer as well as, you know, the other things that I do. I'm really proud of it. And I think, again, just kind of reflecting on where it came from, actually, I've developed both of my careers at the same time. They've both grown together. And I hadn't really acknowledged that before, whereas now I do. And I think actually they've both been really important in my lives and for each other, which, you know, again, is, I think, important now for me to acknowledge. I don't have any other really hobbies, and I don't. Is writing a job, was your question? It's funny because now, well, my writing has always been about deadlines, because if I don't have a deadline, I don't do my writing. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I would, you know, if I didn't have a deadline, probably for this book, I wouldn't have written, you know, everything.
I always say that. I said that to my editor, "Give me a deadline."
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise I won't, you know, it won't get done. And so for me, kind of early on in my career, having like competitions and a deadline, so I've just got to get this thing done because there's a competition deadline, I've got to get it in, so get it done. So deadlines have very much been a part of my writing process and have really helped me. Now, obviously I have, you know, deadlines, but again, if I didn't have them, you know, the writing wouldn't happen. So for me, that doesn't necessarily move it into sort of a place that I'm unhappy with, because that's been my process. So it doesn't feel like a job, no, I guess. I really enjoy being in the spaces. You know, there are always those moments where you're like, "Oh, I've got no idea what I'm doing. I can't do this. It's rubbish. I don't, you know, I'm a bit in that space of a play that I'm writing at the minute. I'm just like, I don't know how to write a play. I don't know what, I don't know. And you have those moments, and, you know, I feel like I'm wasting lots of time angsting about stuff. But I really enjoy the space. It's still my happy space. And I don't really have, you know, it's interesting, what other hobbies do I have? I don't really, you know, I watch trash TV and you know, whatever, but not, no.
It's such a, you know, it was such an interesting question. And especially when I started thinking about it, because I'm like, well, as I said, writing was always my hobby. That was always the thing that I did. But when you start to think about it, maybe not think about it so hard, just, you know, while you are sitting there watching trash TV, you'll find that you'll be like, oh, actually, I do like doing these other things, and maybe these are extra parts of me. But it was interesting, when you were saying about all the angst you have as a writer. I was doing an event yesterday, and someone, I can't remember exactly what the question was, something along the lines of, how does it feel when you're starting a book? And I said, I have the same response every time I sit in front of the computer, open up a blank document on Scrivener and start, even though I may have written a plan, and I always write a plan, but I look at the document and I'm like, how am I going to do this? Like, how do I write a book? I don't know how to write a book. I can't do this again. And I just think sometimes it's just part of the process. You have to go through all these mental gymnastics to get you to write that first line.
Yeah, I think I'm exactly the same. And I think actually it can be positive in many ways, because you're coming with a fresh slate, and for me, it's then getting back to the basics, I can interrogate, actually, what is it that I want to convey here, and how am I going to do that? And, sometimes I might even, consult a structure book or a storybook or something like that to kind of help me to kind of think again about, what is it I'm trying to achieve? And so actually that is really helpful for me. It takes time, and it feels a bit like, oh my goodness, I'm starting again. But there is something important about that process as well, that I think is really important.
So when did you get used to calling yourself a writer? Because I remembered, like, it took me a really long time to stop responding that I'm a lawyer whenever people ask me what I did. It just took me, I don't think I started calling myself or saying I'm a writer first until The Binding Room came out. Right. So that would have been like 2022. Yeah, 2022. Right. Paperback was in 2023. And that's when I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm a writer and a lawyer. But it took a really long time for me to get there. Yeah.
For me, I think probably the same. So I've sort of been writing for about 20 years. But as I say, it's only recently that I've sort of interrogated that bit and actually sort of admitted, this is something that's important to me. It's not a side hustle. It's not like even a hobby. It's like actually really integral to me. I think it really helps when you've got other people calling you writers. Yeah. So, my book calls me a writer. I'll go to an event and someone will say Mel Pennant, the author, so you hear it said back to you. And I think you hear it enough times and you begin to see it for yourself. Yeah. So now I very much feel like a writer and an author, and I'm really happy to lead with that, actually. It's becoming a lawyer was really important to me because I was the first lawyer, the first person in my family to kind of become a lawyer. So it came with all this prestige, and actually being in spaces and sort of saying, oh, I'm a lawyer, then seeing people who might assume that you wasn't that for whatever reason, it was really interesting for me to kind of, just be like, oh, yes. So, exactly. So I am. So what are you?
I made it.
Yeah, exactly. So I've worn that title with a lot of pride. But
also, like, your family carries it with pride. Because exactly. Like my mum and mum and dad, anyone who would listen, and my grandmother, anyone, my grandparents, all of them, anyone would listen. Oh yes, Nadine, she's a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly all of that. And as I say, it probably, has previously added a bit of weight. Where, because I can be quite a shy, retiring sort of person, reserved person. So, you say that and people might look at you slightly differently, which is interesting, which is interesting within itself, I think. But so now I say writer, and it's really interesting to see how people then assess you. And sometimes I say writer and lawyer, and depending on who I'm saying that to, they will latch on to whatever they feel is the most important, for them.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever been like consciously aware of anyone responding more to one title than the other, if I've said both. And I think it all depends in the circles that you're running in, basically, when you get that response.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I met someone who I hadn't seen in many years, who was like a friend of the family. And I'd met them at like a writing sort of event. So it was really weird to see them in that event. And it was like amazing. It was like, oh, that's brilliant. I'm seeing them. And then, so I was like the child, they knew me as like a little girl. So I said, oh, I'm a writer and a lawyer. And in that space, they latched onto the lawyer. Oh, you're a lawyer, because that obviously meant something in that space to them, which was interesting. And the doctor, and they'll be like a couple of days ago, and what do you do? And I say I'm a writer and a lawyer, and the doctor latched on to, oh, you're a lawyer, where do you da 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 da, and the writer stuff just went just sort of landed on the floor somewhere. So it's interesting.
It's so interesting because I think my only comparison is like one of my aunts. I think one of my great aunts. As far as she's concerned, me going to work means me going to court. That's what she understands as work. And if I don't call her, and I need to call her actually, if I don't call her in a while, and then she then speaks to my mum or my dad in between the calls, and mum will go, oh no, Nad's she's been busy, writing, she's working, she's writing. What work? Right, writing's not work. That's not work. Because in her head, going to work is going to court. Me sitting at my desk writing a book, even though she's got copies of the books. So I send her copies of the books. That's not work to her.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's a bit around that space as well. Like my working week, like for example, today my son will say to me, oh, are you going to work, mummy? So work means going into the office, basically. Work does not mean being at home. If I'm at home, I'm not working. So it's really interesting. He knows that I can, because you can do your day job working from home as well, but just this, I think you have to, my experience is you have to fight a little bit to sort of say, actually, writing is work. It is work, and it is work. It's like hard work. But, I've sort of changed the way that I work now, so that I'm now part-time. And there is a bit of a sense of when I'm doing my day job, that's work. But when I'm at home, that's not work, which is not, I feel like I do still work full time, but
you do.
I do, but trying to sort of convey that message is a little bit difficult for some people to kind of get that. But it's hugely helpful that I have something to show for it. I can say I've got a book. This is my work. So exactly. I feel really privileged in that sense, in that there is like physical stuff that I can point to and say, actually, I'm a writer, and this is the work that has been acknowledged, and, et cetera, and not every writer has that. So it's quite difficult when you're in that stage where you're not published, or you're, you haven't got any plays on, to sort of assert your space and sort of say, I am a writer, this is what I do. I think that can be quite difficult. So I feel privileged to sort of be in the space where I can at least sort of say, respect me, I'm a writer.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is learning to like set boundaries, like for yourself, because I had to do it when I started. Because when I stopped going to court, and I said, even though I do other things, that means I do have to leave the house, like, and go and teach. But those moments when I'm home, I have to set boundaries for myself. So I do have to use all these focus apps that I've just been ignoring on my computer and on my phone. So I will set the do not disturb up between, I think I set up between 9 o'clock and lunchtime. So unless it's an emergency, you're not going to get through to me, because I'm working. Because when I didn't have those boundaries in place, all and sundry's calling me, messaging me, or they're just popping around like, I'm not free. Like, I have things to do. This is maybe your, this is your spare time, but it's not my spare time. This is my working time.
Yeah, it's really important. I think the other thing is writing can be really intense. And when there are certain points in the writing process, I think, when I will find any distraction at all, not to confront the thing that I really need to kind of sit down and do. And so making sure that you're kind of creating those spaces and sticking to them is so important, because otherwise it's really difficult.
It is. You're family creative. I always think that, and this sounds probably, I shouldn't make assumptions and stuff, but I just feel like when you come from a West Indian family, that there's such a strong, I say, history of storytelling amongst us, and music, like all of that. It's such a strong part of who we are. I just feel, of course, you're going to say yes. There's creativity in your family.
Definitely, but not in the way that, we don't have any sort of, or not to my knowledge, in my immediate family, people who have sort of written books or anything like that. But as you say, a huge storytelling tradition. And I was raised for much of my childhood by my grandparents, and both sets of grandparents have been really involved in my life. And my dad's parents looked after me while I was younger. So I was steeped in that. And it's not like sit down now, I'm going to tell you a story. It's embedded in everything that you do, the humor, the light, the kind of, when they're calling you from, wherever you are or whatever, it's all there. And it's just, it's lovely. I just, now, because, a lot of my grandparents' generations have died away and are, I want it, I want that, and I don't have it anymore, but it's just, it's so amazing. I was really fortunate, I think, to grow up in that environment and to see it all around me. And then, I had an aunt who was a brilliant singer, and was sort of involved in a band. My mum is hugely creative and also sings, and, was always looking for creative outlets. I feel like for the generation just above me, my parents' generation, it felt like they were discouraged from entering their creative pursuits, is my sense. So, my mum was driven into a particular limited kind of career path, and wasn't given the opportunities, I think, that I've had to kind of explore all sorts of different paths. And I've been really fortunate to have parents and grandparents who just willed me to be the best at anything I could be. So they never sort of said, you have to be this or you have to do this. They were always just, are you doing the best you can do in the space? Particularly my dad would always be like, are you the best, which was great. He really pushed me and my sister in that space. It never felt, though, like oppressive. It felt like, you've got opportunities, use them. Are you using them to the best of your abilities? So having all of that in my life, I think, has just been brilliant. And as you say, I think it was all around me as a child, which, is just, amazing.
Yeah, because it's exactly like what you say, is that it's not anyone like my auntie or uncles or my granddad sitting there saying to me, okay, Nadine, let me tell you the story. Back in 1953, let me tell you about the tree. Ain't nothing like that. It would be like, I'm cooking, or I'm with my grandmother in the kitchen and they're cooking, she's cooking something. She's like, well, this is how we would start to cook. You'd get tree stones, put it outside, put your pot outside. And that is them telling the story. But in terms of them telling you the story of how they would cook outside, it's telling you the story of how they grew up and how community was involved in cooking. So that is how they tell stories. And so even when I think about my parents, I don't think about just family. Like my mum, she was a dancer growing up. So we got pictures of her in her outfits with her dance group, and my dad was always playing the guitar, and then my uncle was in a band. So it's as well as having that, I know he said it's not oppressive, but they do want you to be secure, which is why they do urge you to have a career. But they're still, this is still who you are. This is still where you come from, this community, I said, of music and storytelling and carnival and all of these things. So I think it's great. Can I say something? With your book. So when I was I was on Google, because you have to. So I was on Google. I wasn't stalking you. I was doing my research, and I went on your website. And obviously, I've seen this book cover, also because I have it, the UK cover, and then I saw the US cover, and I don't know if you have a favorite. And I do love this cover. But then when I saw the US cover, I was like, oh God, Miss Hortense. And I keep saying Miss Hortense. Miss Hortense is walking on dominoes. And just
Yes, yes,
seeing the dominoes, because I just have flashbacks to being young, being sent up to bed on a Friday night, but my dad's downstairs with his cousins and his brothers and his friend. All you're hearing is dominoes slamming on the table, key domino. Or if I go to Grenada, they're playing dominoes outside the shop. And it's such a strong part of, like, I think all West Indian households. So when I saw the cover, I was like, look at her walking on dominoes. I love it.
I love both of the covers. I think both of them capture the character of Miss Hortense. And thank you so much for reading the book. You'll know. I think I know her. I think many people sort of been, I know who Miss Hortense is.
I think that's what I said in my quote. I'm like, I know everyone in this book.
Yeah, she's Miss Hortense is a complex character. She doesn't take any nonsense. She's got somewhere to be. She's fearless, driven. She's all of this, and I feel like both book covers actually really capture that sense of her. I adore both of them. Actually, like really, really do. And I've had fantastic artists on both sides of, in the US and here, really kind of get the essence of her, which I think is important. I'm looking at the book and talking about it at the same time. But
it feels like a person, doesn't it? It's like, this is me. It's a part of me.
Yeah, exactly. It's really funny. I was thinking about a funny story to tell you actually when I was coming on here. You have the unboxing of the proof. So first of all, you've got all these moments in sort of the book world, which when you're not in the book world, you're like, what is she unboxing? Is that her real book? I don't understand what the proof is. So I think I almost didn't really understand that when I was unboxing it too. So obviously there'll be another unboxing, I suppose, when I get the proper book at some point. So I'll do that. But you watch all these Instagram feeds, and this is what you do when you unbox your book, basically. So I got everyone, my family, my kids, my husband, all upstairs. We were all going to unbox this book together. And I'd been told by my publishers they were sending this box of books. So we got a box, which was brilliant. So we all went upstairs with this box. And I started unboxing it, and everyone was taking pictures and whatever. I was unboxing it, and then I took out this book which had a completely different title to the book that was my book, and it was like very shabby. And I'd forgotten actually that I'd ordered a secondhand book, and this was the secondhand book. There's a moment where you're like, it goes to all these experiences that you talk about on this show. You're like, maybe they just decided that, they didn't, or they changed the title.
Poor you.
Really. So there is another video of me like looking at this book being a bit like, I don't know what to do with this. So it was, it's just,
You'll have to share it one day, because I think, it's that moment of like, did they change their mind? Like what?
Exactly.
What is this? It's like Mark, because me and my UPS guy now, we're now friends. So Mark, he was constantly just delivering like boxes to me. Yeah. So it could have been from, that the publishers have sent, and the US publishers were sending books to me as well for me to sometimes to sign and then to send them back to the States. Right. So at one point he's like, what is all this? It's like, I'm here all the time. So I was like, Mark, I'm a writer, because obviously we become friends now. And bless him. Like the next time he came, he's like, I bought your books and I've gone on holiday with them. So I thought that was really sweet. But the unboxing, no one tells you what to do with an unbox. You just see these unboxing videos. You think, okay, I'll make an unboxing video. And I think what the great thing is about them, which I don't think probably maybe it does come across, is that no matter how many times you've done an unboxing video, every time you do open up that box and you see your book, it still feels like it's the very, very first time it's ever happened to you. You're like, I made this, I did this.
It's so strange. I think the whole process, right from the beginning, when you kind of, because you write your book, it's in your head, you've got your ideas, you get it onto a page, then you give it to someone to read, and so that's an amazing, like, gosh, someone's actually reading my words, and so one of the first people to read my words was Nell. So then my agent. So then you're like, oh, someone's reading my book. It's like amazing. And then you go on submission and there are a number of other people reading your book. And you're like, oh my gosh, other people are reading my words. That's like amazing. And they're telling you about your book. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And then, so, and I'm right at the beginning of my journey. So obviously these proofs have gone out and other people have started reading my books, including you. Thank you very much indeed. So, that's amazing. And, I don't know how it will feel when I get to publication day and there's other people reading my books and, it's really strange that it kind of starts just, an idea from you in your head. It doesn't exist. And then it's this other thing, which, I'm kind of just at the beginning of that journey, but I'm kind of in awe of already.
It's, and I can't remember for the life of me where I saw, it must have been on Instagram, but I don't think I was following it. So I'm not even sure how I even saw A Murder for Miss Hortense. And as soon as I saw it, I'm like, I want it. It just sounds like a very arrogant and privileged thing to say, but I'm like, I want it. I need to read this book because it's kind of like a two-pronged thing. One is that I really just want to read it because it looks so good, it looks amazing. But then the other hand side of it is that this is another book by a Black author and it's just telling a story. It's not fitting into, as far as I can tell, and I'm making assumptions based on the cover, it's not fitting into any kind of tropes about what Black people should be writing, the sort of, those sort of books. It's just telling, it's just a story. And it looks like it's going to be fun. It looks like cozy crime. And these are the things we just like. So, and it's like, I need to support that. So it's like, it's a two-pronged thing. Yeah. So I don't know I don't know who I emailed. I don't know who I messaged. And then I think at some point you're like, no, I was going to ask if you want a copy. And I'm like, yes, I want a copy. Because you need to support.
I think, as I say, I follow you. I read your books. I'm, in awe of you, I think. But I'm also conscious that, there aren't, it sounds, it's not the case, but, there are limited Black authors in this genre and in this space. And so it's really helpful to see you and to see others like Dorothy Coombson and Nicola Williams. You have been the entry into this space for me. So it's like when I'm kind of speaking to you or going to an event or like whatever, it's actually really important for me because of, where I've come from and what I'm seeing and how you guys have sort of opened doors, which I think is really, really important. And so, thank you so much.
Oh, you know what? I'm not going to cry. I want to get emotional. But, when I think about growing up and obviously like social media made a big difference to the exposure you have, not only for me as a writer, but also for readers who look like you, readers who don't look like you, seeing what else is out there. But when you think growing up, it was so limited. And I said, there was always seemed to just be one type of book. And even though you may have been interested in reading romantic books or sci-fi or crime, you didn't see anyone who looked like you fitting into that space. Yeah. So you just assumed like, well, they don't expect us to write these sort of books or be interested in even reading these sort of books. Like publishers and the gatekeepers of the world, they're not looking at us as an audience. So it's so nice to, I can't remember what event it was, but it might have been with Dorothy, but I did an event and like halfway through the event, I know it was at Brixton Library, that was it, with Nicola Williams and Nina and Stella. And halfway through, I was thinking, oh my God, we're just here, just talking about books and talking about us. And it's not a diversity panel. It's not a specialist. It's Black History Month. Let's put on a panel because it's in February, and Black History Month is in October. It wasn't anything. There was nothing attached to it. It was just a panel launching Nina's book. And you've got 3 Black women, 1 Asian woman on the panel. And it's just, and that's just how it should be. So there shouldn't be anything attached to it. And I just thought, this is a great moment. Like I wrote about it. I'm like, I just love this moment because this is how it should be. So which is why, seeing you write cozy crime with Miss Hortense in her bag. And literally, when I see her, I just think of those times walking up the market, when I say being dragged up Deptford Market with my mum and then bumping into like my grandmother all like one of my grandmother's friends, and that's how they are.
Yeah. And I'm so pleased that you have connected with the book in that way, I think, because that is what I want. And I kind of didn't set out to write a particular book or to, I just wanted to write the story that I knew. I felt it. It was familiar to me. It's been really interesting for people to say, "Oh, I didn't. I've never come across this world before. I've never, and for me, it's just so normal. It's lovely when people say that. I'm really pleased that I'm opening a door for some people, but for others, who particularly may come from sort of an Afro-Caribbean community or a close-knit community, for them to say, actually, I recognise it. It really gives me heart, because I feel like, okay, fine, that's good. I hope I've drawn, a good reflection of a community that, I am so inspired by. So, and it is fictional, I should say. So, and, I think I always have to say, in this space that we're talking about, sometimes there's this sense that, oh, okay, so you've written this now, so then there doesn't need to be another cozy crime book.
I always say it's like this, it seems like there's a 1 in 1 out policy. Yeah. And it's like you won't have that anywhere else at all. So there shouldn't just be because, Mel Pennant has written a cozy crime with Miss Hortense, doesn't mean that, I don't know, Sandra Kane living in Dagenham who comes from, I don't know, her family's from St. Vincent, doesn't mean that she can't write another cozy crime novel, and that can't then be out there in the market.
Exactly. There are multiplicity of stories by multiplicity of authors, from all different backgrounds, and and as I say, this is fiction, so I would hate for that to be the case. I think I have so much more to say in this space, but there are so many other stories and et cetera, that can be said in all sorts of different spaces, and I really hope that this encourages other people as well to write or pick up a pen if they haven't done before. So,
listeners, it's time for a very short break. If you're enjoying this conversation with Nadine Matheson and want to help keep the podcast going, why not buy me a cup of coffee? Your support goes such a long way in keeping these conversations flowing. Just check out the link in the show notes. Did Miss Hortense come to you first? Did you hear her before you started, or did the story come to you?
So what's interesting is I knew who Miss Hortense had to be, and she was a bit intimidating for me because she's very different to me as a character. She is bold, and she will speak her mind, whereas I am very much a people pleaser. I'm sort of, okay, don't say that, but she's not like that. She'll say whatever the hell she wants. So I found her quite an intimidating character to write initially, because I think I was a bit scared of doing her justice and maybe trying to almost pander, and dumb down what I knew were the kind of the characteristics of her. So my entry into Miss Hortense was actually through Blossom, who is like Miss Hortense's sidekick. She's like her foil, her Watson.
Yeah.
I just began to have so much fun with Blossom because she can say whatever she wants, and she does, and she doesn't have to be correct. She doesn't care if it's correct. She just needs to get it out. And then as I was writing Blossom, then I could write Miss Hortense, because I knew what Miss Hortense's reaction would be to Blossom, and I could kind of then step into Miss Hortense. So I kind of did it that way. Like, the character of Miss Hortense was first, but I couldn't get her voice until I had sort of explored the world a little bit more. Yeah. And then, she came through incredibly clearly.
It's like you had to do the world building first. Exactly. Even though you know the world, you personally know the world, but it's different when you then have to transfer that world onto the page.
Yeah, that's true. And I think in all these things, like I had the idea, I was writing another idea beforehand, and it was more historical fiction, and I couldn't get the voice, I thought I write this story, I'll be here for years because I will research the hell out of it. I felt like I had to know everything about, blah, 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 blah. I was kind of ordering all these books and doing lots of research. And I was thinking I'll never, again, because, writing is not the only thing I do. I just knew I'd never write this book. I'd always tell myself that I didn't understand it enough to be able to write it. And then I had this idea and I was like, well, I sort of know this world and actually I can hear the dialogue, so I can write it. So I'm just going to write it. And that then, I just knew that I could do this, I think. Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you, when you obviously, because I'm Grenadian, I will always hear a Grenadian accent, but because I know Miss Hortense is Jamaican, I hear the Jamaican accent. And when someone from St. Vincent, I hear that. When it's someone from Beige, they're Bajan, I can hear it. So when I'm reading the characters, like automatically my brain, I hear the accents because that's what you grew up around. So are you doing the same when you're writing them? Are you distinctly hearing Miss Hortense speaking or Blossom speaking?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I am. And what's interesting is that, some of the reviews have sort of said they've had to try and get used to the dialogue, or was it sort of another question that someone asked me was whether it was a deliberate, did I explicitly think I'm going to write in a kind of patois? And it's absolutely not. It's just how I hear the voices. This is how they speak. So this is how it's translated onto the page. And actually the way in which they speak is really important. It goes back to that sort of, that what they say and what they don't say and how they say it, and the subtext, the kind of the humor, the kind of, the straight talkingness, all of that you get in the dialogue. So I couldn't convey that in any other way other than how it's written on the page, is my sense.
But it also, in a way, when someone says that, and I'm not saying they're saying it with any kind of malice or anything, but when someone says that, there's kind of like, yes, you can write about these Black characters, these Caribbean and I shouldn't even say Caribbean because it's just generalizing all of us into a lump. But these Jamaican characters, or Grenadian, or Bajan, St. Lucia, and everybody, all the individual islands. But even though you're writing about them, you still need to simplify the language to make it palatable for people who are not from these places. And I don't think you would necessarily get that if it was, I'll just say, if it was like a white person, English person writing a book about their community, you wouldn't, I don't think you'd ever get that. But the fact that someone's saying that, this isn't, I'm having to do some work, well, do the work.
Yeah, that's true. It's a really good way of putting it. And I hadn't really thought about it in that way. I mean, obviously, I want the book to be accessible and I want people to engage with the world. But, patois is a derivative of English anyway. So it's not like like if you can read it, I think, and you can get it, and you can, I don't see that it's not like I don't think it's inaccessible. I just think, you just, like with any book, you just get into the rhythm of it and then, you understand it. But as an author, as I say, to me, it comes very naturally to write in the way that I do. So sometimes I do step back and think, is that too much? But it's really helpful for you to hear you say, actually, like maybe just do the work and, and you'll get it. And
I think so.
Actually, it's such an intrinsic part of the book, I think, that if I wrote the characters on their dialogue in another way, I think it would change the book completely.
Well, it wouldn't even, and if I was to read it that way, like I said, if you were just to do like a general, well, this is, from the Caribbean, so we all talk the same. And it's like, well, no, we don't. Because you said, even though patois is a derivative of English, but depending on what island you're from, it's different. So if you're from Grenada and Dominica, our patois, and I think St. Lucia as well, our patois is French as well. So it's English and French. So it's not going to be the same. So if I was reading it and it was just this this generalized Caribbean language, simplified or anglicized, I would be reading it thinking, I like it, but I just feel for me like there's something missing. It'll be missing that authenticity. Like if you didn't say key domino, I don't know what you would say is an alternative. I'd be like, well, they didn't say key domino. We all know what key domino means. And it's excitement.
Yeah.
If you didn't have that, I'd be like, oh, something's missing.
Yeah.
I like it, but there's something missing.
Yeah. I can get that. And as I said, I mean, a lot of this has just come, any writing, I think it comes from sort of inside of you, in your gut. What works for you and what doesn't. And so when you start to veer, I mean, I guess what's interesting is during the editing process, if you don't trust that process, you can sort of maybe go off into a space where, someone might say, oh, actually, why don't you use this word instead of that word? Or why don't you, maybe you need to change that phrase or whatever. And I think, you do kind of have to hold on to what has come from you and make sure that you're conveying that on the page. Because as you say, otherwise, I think probably when a reader is reading it, they'll kind of get a sense, okay, maybe that isn't quite right. And, and that can be jarring as well.
Yeah. Before I go on to ask you about, because we've been obviously talking about it, but obviously I need you to tell the audience about A Murder for Miss Hortense. When I was on your blog page, right, and it was just so funny, it coincided with something I saw on Threads. And on Threads, I don't know why it always seems to be on Threads. It never happens on any other social media platform. You get the worst kind of book advice, like writing advice on there. And someone had said that, like, the worst, don't even think about submitting to an agent until you've finished your manuscript. Like, you just need to make sure your book is done. Don't think about it because an agent won't read it. And I'm reading that post and I'm thinking, I don't think that's necessarily true, because I know people who have submitted on a partial and they've been taken on, literally they've been taken on the partial. When I was doing my MA, one of the students on the MA, she submitted, it wasn't even a partial. I think it was just her first 2,002 chapters and she got taken on. So there's no book, because we hadn't even completed the first year of the course. And then I was on your website, reading up about Mel Pennant. And you got your agent with no book. So I'm like, don't listen to this writing advice. Do you want to tell your story about how you found your agent? Because I thought people need to know this. There's so many different ways.
Yeah, I think there is. So for me, what happened was I had, I was on a brilliant pilot scheme that Hachette UK had done with Tamasha Theatre Company, which is a theatre company that I've been involved with for a very long time. And they really invest in creatives, and they have invested in me and many other artists. And they had this kind of pilot scheme that they just wanted to put on for playwrights who were maybe interested in novel writing. And basically we had to sort of submit a little bit of kind of an idea for a book. And then I think maybe about 8 of us were chosen to do this pilot scheme, and it was an amazing pilot scheme. So we got to go into Hachette buildings, I think every 2 weeks, and we were just kind of told about the publishing industry. So agents came to speak to us, writers, editors, and it kind of opened the door. I think I may have said, but I think one of the great things, certainly that I've been able to benefit from, is the transparency that's been provided, I think, by writers, by podcasters, by yourself, just to kind of open the door a little bit in terms of what is this writing world. And that course was an absolutely brilliant opportunity to do that. And it was geared towards playwrights from the global majority. So what is really interesting about that pilot scheme is that kind of, I think 8 of us went on it, and 4 of us got book deals as a consequence, which is huge, really high percentage, which I think shows the value of those kind of targeted schemes, I think. And, the other writers who now have books, Phoebe McIntosh, Dominoes, and Aisha Siddiqui, amazing writers. And, I can't, I think, advocate enough for those kind of schemes, which I think are needed in this space where there is so much around the industry not being as diverse as it could be and not investing in writers. But that's a sort of aside. But what I should say is, as part of that scheme, we got a mentor. I got a brilliant mentor who really advocated for me. And she introduced me to Nell just at like one of these Meet the Agent events. And I had done one of those kind of meet the agents events for my MA in screenwriting. And I was so disappointed in that, because you sort of, I don't know, I think you've been on an MA, Nadine. I think they do these, like, meet the agents. And the agents were so not interested in anything that, you sort of excited, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to get like an agent and da-da-da. And, you send a few emails, people ignore you. It was a really negative experience previously for me in these kind of meet the agent events. So I had no hope for this kind of meet the agent event. But I met Nell, and she was really interested in my idea. And so I thought, okay, I've got this golden nugget. I'm going to keep Nell's email address. And then when I write something, because, when I was doing the course, I hadn't really written anything. And, I hadn't written a book. But I thought, I'm going to just, keep hold of this contact, because this is golden. And, I'm going to keep in touch. So I kept in touch over the years, just like an email, like, oh yeah, that idea, I said I'd do, like, I will come back, but I've written this play and this play's on it, just to kind of show that I was serious, but also I hadn't really written anything. And then I'd written a play called Seeds, which was going to be nationally toured, and it was like the biggest creative thing I'd ever done. It was, the history of that play is also for me quite amazing, because it was a play I'd written years and years ago, and I'd put in a drawer. I picked it up a couple of years later. I was like, there's something here that there's something that still gets me off for. I'm going to, tinker with it, and then I'm going to enter it into a competition. So I entered it into the Alfred Fagan competition, which is an amazing competition, again, for writers of Afro-Caribbean descent. It got shortlisted for that, along with like the Barbershop Chronicles and all these other amazing plays. I was like, oh my gosh, it's been shortlisted. And then it was picked up by another theatre company called Theatre Fahudzi, and a brilliant director. And we developed it for another 2 years, and then it was going to be shown in March 2020. So like my biggest thing ever was going to be on it. Globally toured, all these theatre companies kind of around the UK. This was my moment to kind of test whether or not I was, am I going to become a full-time writer, whatever it might have been. It's going to be an amazing event for me. And obviously you just say the date and it didn't happen.
I know, I'm just like, I'm crushed for you.
People had bought tickets, and I was like, no, what's happening now with the play? And I can remember it was scheduled for Soho. That was like its finale, and Soho Theatre, oh my gosh. And I just kept looking on the internet, and at Soho, every month there were all these plays that were just like cancelled. So it became very evident that it was not going to have its like life.
This moment.
It wasn't going to have it, because putting on a play is really expensive, all of the actors, etc. There were all these plays that kind of had just not had their moment, and the industry was also going through a lot. People were furloughed, and creatives. I mean, I was lucky to have a day job, but there were creatives who, that was their living, their livelihood, and so it wasn't going to happen. And it was just that moment of like, okay, fine, this is the world telling me I shouldn't be a writer. I'm just going to not be a writer. I'm going to do this other stuff, So I had that moment where I was like, right, I'm not a writer. I'm not calling myself a writer. This was sort of telling me, everything I needed to know about my writing career. And then, as I said to you before, not writing just doesn't make me very happy. I wasn't probably a very nice person to be around for a little while. And so I just thought, okay, maybe let me try and explore a forum that I don't need an audience for, I don't need a venue, I don't need actors, I don't need, I'm going to try and explore this creative writing novel space. So I just started trying to write a novel, and I sort of had written 30 pages of Murder for Miss Hortense. It wasn't called that then. And I thought at Christmas, right, I've done this. Should I submit it to Nell? This is like my golden nugget. This is like my, all the advice, as you say, is you have to have a finished manuscript. Yeah. You've got to you should, no, don't do it. You're messing up this contact. But there was a bit of me that was like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, I just needed a bit of encouragement.
Yeah.
If Nell comes back and is just like, yeah, keep going. If she gives me some notes, that'd be like amazing. So my finger sort of hovered over, should I send this to Nell? Because it wasn't the perfect thing. It was just me kind of trying to be in that space. And I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to send it. So like around Christmas, I was just like, send. And I wasn't expecting anything back. I think Nell came back and said, and it was Christmas, so probably I got like an out of office, and I was like, okay, fine. And then Nell came back and was like, okay, thanks for this. Can you send me like a synopsis or something? I was like, oh, okay, fine. I was like, send like, do this. And then I was just expecting her to either come back with just some comments or, I wasn't sure, but I was not expecting her to come back and say she wanted to have a meeting. So that, like, you sort of Google, like,
what does it mean?
Like, oh my gosh, okay, right, I've got a meeting with Nell, so, I'm going to, prepare for this thing. And then I was sort of thinking, what's the best case scenario? Again, the best case scenario is just some notes or something. The worst case scenario, she says, is rubbish, don't write, don't, blah, blah, blah. And then literally we had this meeting and she literally said, will you marry me? And I was like, oh my gosh, like what?
It's a proposal.
It's a proposal. And I was like, I really did not think like, Nell is like this superstar agent who like is amazing. Like you Google now and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And for her to kind of say that, it was the beginning of this whole mind-blowing experience, because I knew then that if I could write my book, that the opportunities would be phenomenal based on kind of what I'd known Nell had done in other spaces. But what's really interesting is like, I sort of told my family and that, and they were like, yeah, so what, have you written a book? Like no one kind of understood like the enormity.
No, they wouldn't get it until they see this. That's when they get it. But before that, you're like, well, all right, okay. When's dinner?
Yeah, exactly. They, luckily I had, there was someone who's a writer at my daughter's school, and I sort of said, oh, I've got representation by now. And she sort of got it. She was the only person that really got it. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Everyone else was just like, that's nice. Anyway. So back to your point, I have heard, and I've heard on your podcast, other stories where writers have been like, they haven't followed that traditional kind of a full manuscript, and you get beta readers, and, then you do like 10 edits, and then that's only then do you kind of submit. And I think that is probably there partially to help the industry, because agents get so many submissions. So I can completely see why that would be the advice. And I think it's also really important that you put forward your best work. I think that's also really important. But, there are lots of different ways that you can enter this industry, I think. And, I guess I had a playwriting background, so I could show that, I have written something full length. It has been, picked up by others. If you've got something else behind you, I think you can utilize that as leverage in this space too, which is important.
I just said, I think it's just so important for people to ignore half the nonsense they see on threads, basically about what you should or shouldn't do. And sometimes it's important to sometimes just go with your gut, which is like what you did. So, right. Would you like to tell would you like to tell the listeners of the conversation about A Murder for Miss Hortense?
Absolutely. So A Murder for Miss Hortense is the first of a new crime series. It stars Miss Hortense, who is a retired Caribbean nurse from the Windrush generation. She is just this amazing woman who is a gardener. She is a fantastic cook. She takes great pride in everything she does, including her home, which is in a fictional town in Birmingham called Bigglesweigh. And she has been a nurse for 35 years, and all of her skills have enabled her to detect people's motivations from just like the tiniest physical clue. But also she's completely fearless. So she, she doesn't care. She will confront the local drug dealer, priest, businessman. That's her. But 35 years ago, something awful happened, which created a sort of schism between her and her community. And it sort of has made her a bit of a recluse. But then a dead man turns up at the bottom of some stairs in a locked house with a note beside his body. And it was a Bible quote, which was the same quote that was whispered into the victims of brutal attacks 35 years prior. And now Miss Hortense knows that she's got to get back into the crime of the past and the current crime. And, it's going to take all of her skills and all of the mysterious contents of her handbag, which is really, really important, to persuade the community that there's a killer amongst them.
I love it. Right. And I now have two questions that I ask following on from you talking about the book. But can I just say, before I even ask those questions, the minute I read Partner Hand, a partner's so funny. It's like you grow up hearing about a partner hand before you even understand what it means. And then also you grow to learn, you understand what a partner is. And it's so important because it's how our communities, we were able to put, save money without putting it in a bank, and in order to buy properties or buy a car or rent a business and do all of those things. When I heard a partner hand, I was like, oh God, I remember those times. I've got to put £20 in the envelope for the partner. You're like, partner? What's a partner? And you, because you're English, you're hearing partner. It's like, no, it's not partner. It's partner.
Yeah. It's such an important part of our community. And, as I say, I was raised by my grandparents. My grandmother was a partner lady. Again, it's one of those things that I'm really kind of just in awe of, the idea that a community would come to this country and, be financially excluded from certain institutions and be like, you know what, I don't care. This is our this is our system. This is what we're doing to solve that issue.
That will work.
And we're going to use that to build our communities, to send for people from back home, to buy our houses, to build our houses back home, to, build our businesses. The list is infinite. And I think like my generation, we sort of stand on the shoulders of that. Like, that's, we were built from that system. And as you say, it's normalized for us. But, I sort of say it's a really simple system. I can remember thinking, but it's just the same money. There's like, what is, I don't quite understand, but, it's hugely complex because it's about the community coming together, trusting each other.
Yeah, it's the trust involved.
Trust that's really important. You often have to have a very strong character who is well respected in the community to kind of put everyone in line, make sure everyone is contributing, make sure that, they're distributing to, the relevant people. When I speak to people in this space, my stepmother sort of said, when I went to the partner lady, she gave me advice. She told me, these are really important people who were the bedrock of these communities. And as you say, again, my generation, I think it's very much been about individualism. You get on, you get your education, you do this, blah, blah, blah. But so we've kind of lost that kind of community-ness, I think, a little bit, that was, at the heart of sort of my grandparents' generation. And I just wanted to kind of capture that.
Yeah, because a lot of our grandparents, I would say that the reason they have their houses, they're able to buy their houses in the 60s is because of the partner hand. And for those who don't know what a partner is, like very simple terms. So like a group of 10 people get together and every week, 10 people, they put their £10 in the pot. And then that pot gets given to Mel on week 1. And then week 2, the pot comes to me. And in week 3, the pot goes to Claire. And that's how the partner hand works. So you're able to do these things. So Mel, did you face any challenges in writing A Murder for Miss Hortense?
I think maybe just the usual challenges of trying to convince myself that I could do it, that I could write a book, and that I was good enough to write a book. Like many, in all of my spaces, I suffer from imposter syndromes. I'm like, I can't write a book. This is rubbish. So I think that the main challenge came from myself, and it was kind of just sitting down and just sort of saying, you've got, you can do this and you can write this book. And I think one of the best pieces of advice I've seen and had in this space is to just write. Like, you don't have to. I think I was under the illusion that you go into a bookshop and you see a book and that's how it always was, this like perfect, polished, shiny thing. So not, but I didn't know that. And I think almost many people don't. I have a lot of friends, they're like, oh, I'll write a book when I, get the right idea and everything's perfect. And I'm like, no, you just write, just whatever you want to write. And then you work on it and you craft it and it becomes, and actually it's really collaborative. There are other people that will input and, so I think, for me, the challenge was just getting myself to have enough confidence within my writing to just sit down and get it done, and believe in it enough to do that.
So if you could spend an afternoon with any of your characters, whom would you choose and why?
That's such a good question. It has to be Miss Hortense, because she's like the Don. She's an amazing woman, and as I say, she's very different to me. She has a lot of attributes of my grandparents. So the idea that you're talking about, sort of being not dragged, but being taken along the market. I'm the one holding.
I say dragged because that's what it felt like when you were 8. Go, what?
And she's getting into all of her spaces and she's doing what she's got to do, and you're just sort of like
on the sidelines.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I just, and as I say, that generation is going, and it really saddens me because I miss my grandparents. I miss
me too.
Everything that they've done for kind of us. The amazingness of them to move to a country they didn't know, they had never been here before, and to kind of set up roots for us.
And homes. They were stable homes.
Stable homes. I think some people say, what was the motivation for writing A Murder for Miss Hortense? A little bit of the motivation was that I was hearing all this I've had, in the media, you get all this narrated, which is really negative about our communities, that we're victims, black on black crime. That's all you're seeing. And yet my knowledge of my community is not that at all. It's these people that are so strong, so resilient, that have put up with, so much, and yet do it with kind of a dignity and a humor and a kind of a can-do, will-do attitude, completely different to kind of a lot of the narrative and, other stuff that I see. It was quite important for me. I sort of had that in mind when I was writing this book.
Okay, so the last set of questions. Are you an introvert or extrovert, or a hybrid of the two?
I'm definitely an introvert. And it's really funny because I met you at Harrogate. I think that was the first time I met you.
Yeah, you
did. And I, as I say, I listened to this podcast, and I don't think I had understood the value of that question until I'd gone to Harrogate. And then I was like, oh, wow. So because, as a writer, you have your introverted space, but then there is this other space, which is like this kind of festivals and sort of being out there and sort of, and I love the ideas of sort of festivals. I love carnival. I love sort of, I love parties. But naturally I'm quite introverted. So it takes a lot of energy for me to be in those other spaces. So I was like, now I know why the dean asked that question, because as a published author, you're kind of in all of those kind of private space when you're writing, but also a very public space, and moving to a very public space. And I guess it's how you manage yourself in those spaces that is something that I'm going to be watching, I suppose, as the journey progresses.
I think, I call myself a hybrid, but I think I'm probably more, if I was doing like a percentage, I'll probably say I'm maybe 70 extrovert and 30% introvert. But even at those festival moments, especially something like Harrogate, it's such a lot. there have been times I'm like, right, I'm done. I'm going back to my hotel. And all I have done, I've gone to my hotel, laid on the bed, watched Four in a Bed, ordered some room service, and I've just chilled out for like 4 hours. Because you do need to decompress before you then, okay, now I'm going to shower, get ready, and put myself back out there. It's a lot.
It's really funny because, you know, again, in sort of private practice in law, I can remember as a junior lawyer, you have these events that you're meant to go to where you've sort of got a plate in one hand, a drink in the other, and you're sort of meant to engage in these. And you're like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. And it's a bit like, it's, you know, I think it's, I don't know, it's kind of just being in those spaces where you're like, you know.
When I think about it, because when I'm teaching the baby lawyers, they need to add on like a half an afternoon class where they're just teaching you how to manage those social moments, because they don't tell you, but there really is a big expectation on you to network. And there's some people, they don't like it, they don't know how to. And then you qualify, you go to work, and you're just expected to just perform in these spaces, which is a bit mad. Okay, so
it is. In those spaces as well, you're engaging with people you might not ordinarily be engaging with.
Yeah, you never would.
Yeah. So you're like, what do we talk about? Cricket. I don't know.
Cricket.
I was going to learn all the rules of cricket. I used to watch cricket with my granddad, and really, you know, he'd sit there and we'd have to watch it. I didn't understand this. I was like, I'm going to buy all these books on cricket so that I can talk to people about cricket. I was like, oh gosh.
Cricket was like a rite of passage, though, isn't it? I say, at least I can talk about it. I'm like, thanks to my dad, thanks to my Uncle Len, thanks to my granddad, like I could talk about it. All those moments come home from school, especially in the summer holidays, coming from outside. Why are you watching cricket? Why is this match going on for 4 days? Like, why? Why are we still here? So you have it. Okay, so what challenge or experience in your life shaped you the most? And I always say it can be good or bad. There's need to be this is the worst thing that ever happened in my life.
Yeah, I think every moment shapes you. You know, it goes back to, I'm a real firm believer, like, you know, no work is wasted. I spoke about that play that, you know, was dusted off and then taken back out. I spoke about seeds. You know, that was a really interesting moment, and one where I could have been like, I'm not writing again. But actually, if that hadn't have happened, I probably wouldn't have written my book. You know, so everything happens for a reason. I can remember there was this screenwriting course that you were going to be able to write for TV or something, and it was a 2-week course, and it was going to be brilliant, and it was open to sort of underrepresented groups. And I somehow had taught myself onto that program, like I was on it already. I was on it, booking my time off to go on this course. I knew everything that was going to happen, and I didn't get on the course, and it was absolutely devastating for me. In just, again, it was this kind of like, this is the moment where I choose whether I'm going to do this or do this, and, you know, and I think in the writing world, actually, it's quite difficult to kind of tell yourself, you know, I will be a published writer, because you don't know if, you know, or whatever. And that was, I don't know why I took that so hard, but I really, really did. And what's interesting is, about a year ago, I was in a room with I don't know, it was an event or something, and I came across someone who was really lovely, and I was speaking to her, and it turned out that she was the sort of the leader of that course.
Oh, wow.
Like, I don't know, you probably don't even know about my application, but I applied, and it was devastating that I didn't get on it. And she was just this amazing woman. She was like, I set up this course, I'm writing myself. I set it up because I wanted to get greater representation into the TV industry. And it was just amazing to kind of hear the motivation for that course even being on, which, you know, it just, I don't know, the world is so small and things are meant to happen for a reason. I was meant to not get on that course, but meet that writer years later. And, you know, I'm really happy to be your mentor, which was just amazing. So, you know, I think everything just happens for a reason. So I haven't fully answered your question.
No, but it's a good answer. It's still a good answer.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay. So if you could go back to when you were 25 years old and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Just to not rush at life, and just not to have patience with myself, and to love myself. I am very critical and hard on myself. And I would just, I'd just say relax, just take your time. I think life, you have different phases of your life, and that is fine. And everything happens when it's meant to happen. This is meant to happen now and wasn't meant to happen, any sooner. When I was approaching 40s, I was kind of like, oh, what have you done? Oh my goodness, like there's no life after 40. And it's funny, I get friends who like are approaching 40 and they sort of the same. And I'm like, it's completely fine. Like,
yeah, you'll be okay.
And it's a brilliant phase. And, the world's not going to end. It's going to, you're still a person. I just give myself that advice. Yeah.
Give yourself grace, I think. Okay, so what is your non-writing tip for writers? I know it's a new one I've thrown at you.
Oh, what do you mean by non-writing?
So it literally always say it could be drink water. Just like, what would you? Yeah,
that's interesting. I would just. Oh gosh, that's hard. I mean, I was going to say, because there's something about just being realistic about everything. And yeah, just like I tend to give myself really harsh deadlines on writing, like, yeah, I'll get that done yesterday. And of course, that's, it's fine for you to take your time to get the things done that need to get done. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a rubbish answer.
No, you know why it's not rubbish?
Exercise is important. Going for walks is important. Yeah.
No, but you know why I say it's not a rubbish answer? Because I've been working on this thing for for ages. But it's something I have to keep putting down because I always say Henley keeps coming back. So it's just something, it's like a little side project I have going on. And in the new year, I said to myself, or maybe before the new year, I said, I'm going to finish it because I've got a gap. And I gave myself a date, like by the 9th of March, I'm going to finish it and send it to my agent. And then we'll see what happens, take it from there. And literally like Monday, I'm in it. We're now when we're recording this, it's going to be the end of March. And Monday I said to myself, why are you rushing this? Like, you didn't need to put such a strict deadline on it because this still needs work and you need to give it time. And there's no need to rush it. So I think it's an important thing. Sometimes you feel like you have to hit it on this date. And I was like, no, you didn't need to put all that pressure on yourself. Like, there is no rush because you just want to get it done and make it sure it's done well. And that's more important.
I think there's things with that as well, because when you do it, it sits in someone's inbox.
Yeah.
And then they'll
my God,
going to look at this in 2 months or something.
Exactly. So, exactly. Exactly.
And the other thing is, I think it's about what you want that to be. So I've just finished the first draft of my second book. And I kind of had to sit down and be like, okay, you've only got however long to write this book, but what is it that you must ensure that it is when you submit it? So there's nice to have that I know that I'll go back, because the writing process anyway, there's lots of toing and froing. So polishing sentences may not be the most appropriate use of my time because that sentence is probably going to disappear. But making sure that I have the right theme, or making sure that I don't know, that I have fully done justice to the essence of a character is probably important, because if I don't make sure that happens now, it's not going to happen in the second or the third draft if people are starting to pick apart that thing. Yeah. So I think it's just working out what is important in that draft, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all the kind of bells and whistles.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. It doesn't have to be perfect, especially not that first draft. No. And I think that's the best thing. The best gift I ever told myself. It does not have to be perfect. Let it be a mess. And it gives you there's freedom in the mess, I always say. So finally, Mel Pennant, where can listeners of the conversation find you online?
So I've got my Wizzy author page, which I got done, that I'm really proud of.
It's so good.
I love it. I was like, should I get this done? Why am I doing this? And then I just thought, actually, this will be my space that I can kind of curate for the world. So I can, rather than just Googling myself and there's random stuff coming up, I can be like, this is who I am. So I'm really pleased I got that done, actually. So I'm at that author address, and I'm also mainly on Instagram.
Okay, we can find you. So that just leaves me to say, Mel Pennant, thank you so much for being part of the conversation.
I'm so pleased. Thank you for having me. It's an honour. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's conversation with Nadine Matheson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a brand new episode featuring more amazing guests. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the podcast grow. And if you'd like to support the show, you can buy me a cup of coffee or sign up on Patreon. The links are in the show notes. And if you'd love to join the conversation as a guest, feel free to send an email to theconversation@nadineMatheson.com. Thanks again for your support, and I'll catch you next time.